This is Rudy Giuliani. Welcome to Rudy's Common Sense. Today's episode, we will focus on the many ramifications of the comments made by Representative Maxine Waters. Let me just say right straight out so there's no confusion. The comments of Representative Maxine Waters made on April 17, 2021 present a prima facie case of incitement to riot. Having gone out of her way to present these incendiary comments in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, of all places, it becomes an even more deliberate and aggravated incitement and a blatant attempt to obstruct justice. These comments were made in a place that had engaged in violence, in violent riots, disguised as protests for 6 straight nights, and a place where a jury was going to be deliberating and rendering a verdict within the next 4 or 5 days that if it goes some wrong way, could result in violence and conflagration all throughout urban America. The 82-year-old second most senior member, I believe, of the House of Representatives traveled 1,114 miles from Washington, D.C., right to Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where they were suffering from 6 days of violent protest, to do what she's done on and off for 5 decades, and that is incite hatred, anger, and even support rioting. In a nation of laws, which America used to be, Maxine Waters would have been held to account long ago. She certainly would have been held to account for these comments if, in fact, we had a nation of equal justice under the law. But we exist, as you know, with a double standard for Democrats and Republicans. Well, let's get right to it. The applicable federal felony statute fits Maxine Waters' conduct like a glove. Let me read it to you. It's 18 United States Code, Section 2101. A, whoever travels in interstate or foreign commerce with intent to incite a riot shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. Whoever travels in interstate commerce with intent to incite a riot. Why else was she traveling? She wasn't going there to join up with peaceful protesters. She wasn't going there to join up with peaceful protesters. The fiction of peaceful protest was gone on day one. On the very night that it happened, the shooting, the killing or shooting by Officer Kim Potter, where she shot and killed 20-year-old Daunte Wright, took place on April 11, 2021 at 1:48 p.m. The circumstances are still very much in doubt, ambiguous. We have in this country a presumption of innocence. Doesn't apply to American police officers any longer, apparently. But in any event, it could have been an accident, it could have been deliberate, or it could have been justified. Daunte Wright was wanted for prior gun crime, aggravated warrant, I believe it was described. So he was someone that the police officer would have probable cause to believe had a weapon or might have had a weapon. When police officer Potter arrived on the scene, what she saw immediately was a fight going on, a struggle going on between Wright and the police. And therefore, she drew her weapon, said it was a taser, and in fact, it was a gun and shot him. Question is, was it an accident? Was it justifiable in her trying to defend her fellow officer from the possibility that he would shoot and kill the fellow officer, since he was wanted for gun violation? Or was it a deliberate crime? We don't know that. We don't know the answer to that. Maxine Waters doesn't know the answer to that. And the people that are ripping apart Brooklyn Center, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and to some extent other cities in America have no idea what the right answer to that is. They're being incited and ignited by one-sided, exaggerated claims when no one yet has engaged in a rational search for the truth, which is, after all, what our rule of law is all about. And now we will take a short break. Your credit card company found suspicious charges on your card. That's simple identity theft. It's annoying, but they cover it. The type of fraud you really need to worry about is home title theft, a devastating crime that takes you off your home's title. And you're not covered by insurance or most identity theft programs. That's why you need Home Title Lock. Here's how easy it is for cyber criminals to get you. The title documents to our homes are kept online. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you just sold your home, and he's the new owner. Then he borrows money using your home's equity and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with your home's title, they help shut it down. Let's get you protected. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. And enter Rudy for 30 free days of protection. That's promo code Rudy at HometitleLock.com. Now let's get back to analyzing this extremely dangerous conduct. This idea of peaceful protest sort of became a myth shortly after the killing of George Floyd, when peaceful protests almost always became violent riots. They were almost the necessary introduction to the violence brought about by Black Lives Matter, Antifa, or other groups. In the case of this Brooklyn Center situation, it was a much smaller sample size. The shooting took place at 1:48 p.m. on April 11, 2021. And by that evening, riots were going on in Brooklyn Center. Demonstrators were climbing on police vehicles. They were throwing bricks. Police had to fire tear gas into the crowd. And one demonstrator threw a lethal large brick at a police officer. In nearby St. Paul, which is a few miles away, 4 people were arrested during looting in the afternoon, within hours. Liquor stores, cell phone stores, and gas stations. Just why this case involving Daunte Wright would justify people stealing from liquor stores and other stores and gas stations and stealing cash and stealing products is part of the sickness of our time, and something that Maxine Waters has had a long association with, as you will find out. So by that night, riots had broken out in the place where it happened, in St. Paul, and in nearby Minneapolis, and in the Twin Cities region. In fact, there were 24 simultaneous looting incidents in Brooklyn Center, and a gunshot was fired into the glass door of a police station in Brooklyn Park, which is adjacent to Brooklyn Center. The point is that by that night, the peaceful protests had become violent, incendiary riots. That continued on the 12th, spread even more. 40 people arrested in Brooklyn Center that night. Now the city was on fire. And even though phony CNN was reporting they were rather peaceful, in the back of phony CNN was fire. Fires and arson does not suggest peaceful riots, nor does the arrest of 40 people, as well as police officers being injured. It continued again on the 13th, the 14th, kind of dissipated a little by the 15th, resumed on the 16th, and on the 17th, they were doing pretty well. until Maxine Waters decided to come there. This rioting that went on for 6 days before Maxine came there to ignite it even further was completely undeterred by what appears to be the clueless mayor of Brooklyn Center and the equally clueless mayors of St. Paul and Minneapolis. And not to be outdone, the governor doesn't seem to know what he's doing either. Rioting for 6 days is not possible in a place where you have a competent mayor or governor. Impossible. It means the police are largely being told to stand by and watch as people's stores are being ripped apart, as their buildings are being burned, as rocks are being thrown at them, as their cars are being burned. Police do minor interventions, but certainly don't want to make it worse by stopping it. Of course, that's the whole fallacy of the Democrat approach to dealing with these riots, which is why they've broken out so much, and particularly all last summer, in cities mainly controlled by Democrat machines. As mayor of New York City for 8 years, I never had a riot. I came into office with a city that had 2 riots in 3 years, major ones, Crown Heights and Washington Heights. I left office with no riots. It just wasn't going to happen. The next riots to take place in New York City was when New York City got a Democrat mayor again, a person named de Blasio. That's 20 years without riots until we had a mayor with the pro-criminal, very indulgent mayor to both criminal conduct and riots, which shouldn't be interrupted with too much police interference. So once again, we watched 6 nights of police basically being observers of riots, as we did all last summer. Into this cauldron now comes Maxine Waters, who has a half-century history of making incendiary remarks that have led to abuse, harassment, obstruction of justice. Maybe those prior statements were crimes. No one would ever dare to look because she's one of the protected class. Maybe they were free speech. But this time, she went way too far and committed a definable, clear crime on the proven record. When you consider that she and her increasingly craven Democrat majority in the House voted to impeach President Trump, when he told the gathering to act peacefully and patriotically, how can they not remove her and have her prosecuted for telling a violent mob to become more confrontational? Making that statement in the middle of that city that had been on fire for 6 nights. Remember the saying that free speech isn't absolute? I think it was Justice Holmes who said, you can't cry out fire in a crowded theater. Well, she cried out fire in a place that was already being burned down. Just let's do it more. Let's be more confrontational. How could they be more confrontational than what they were doing? Looting, assaulting, burning, attacking. Just do it more. The meaning is clear, and the attempts to defend it are pathetic. The 82-year-old member of Congress from La La Land deliberately traveled 1,114 miles to Brooklyn Center, fully aware of the violence there and fully intending to make it worse. She knew it was violent from 6 nights of television. She knew it was violent because she asked for extra protection, police protection. The very police she's attacked for a quarter of a century. She wanted their protection because she knew how violent that community was. So she's got all the intent in the world, all the knowledge in the world. Anybody else that said this, they'd have been arrested immediately. except she's protected. What she's attempting to do is to create another summer of violence, like we had with the Floyd case, which led to months of violence, led to murder, arson, assault, theft, billions and billions of dollars in property damage, and massive setbacks for Democrat-controlled American cities that will take a generation or two to come back. And all of that did nothing to lessen the number of blacks killed in urban America. In many of these places, in fact, in most of them, the murder of black men has increased during this period of time by 50%, by 80%, by 100%. Look what goes on in Chicago every weekend. Who do you think is being killed? With full knowledge of all these facts and knowing how volatile her presence would be, she traveled there with one purpose and one purpose alone, which has been something she's been doing for a long time, to inflame. And maybe because her colleagues in Congress have always been so afraid to discipline her the other times she incited to either violence or harassment or abuse, because they're so afraid to touch her, to do anything about her. Maybe because they agree with her, maybe because they're afraid. I'm sure she felt enabled and empowered to just violate the law and say whatever she wanted to say. She knew nothing would be done to her. She went there ostensibly to just stand with the people, but when her presence was noticed, she made the comments for which she came there to make. The comments are recorded, and they're unambiguous, and they're unambiguous incitement to make the violence worse.
Does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. But I am very hopeful, and I hope that we're going to get a verdict that is say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away.
And not just manslaughter, right? I mean...
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
In pertinent part, Maxine Waters said, as you just saw, we're looking for a guilty verdict for murder. Originally, she said murder in the first degree, which of course is impossible. He's not charged with it. And she did it right on the verge of the case going to the jury, which she had to know. It's common knowledge to everyone following the case, and she surely was following this case. Asked what she thought they should do if the jury didn't return a guilty verdict of murder in the first degree or murder. Waters made it crystal clear. You can take away all the language around it, and it's possible she didn't really understand the question, but she paraphrased it. So in a trial, there'd be no confusion. She paraphrased it. She said, as a question to herself, what should protesters do? And she answered it. Well, we've got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make them know that we mean business, as if they haven't done it already. More confrontational than 6 nights of looting, burning, assaulting, robbing, and destroying Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis again, and St. Paul? More confrontational, Maxine? What do you want them to do, burn the whole place down? Now you will take a break. I accomplished a lot in 2020, exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Thank you for returning. Maxine Waters' comments were so unusual, so incendiary, so intrusive, both into the criminal justice system and the safety of the people of Brooklyn Center and Twin Cities, that for the first time that I can remember, the judge on his own decided to admonish her in very, very strong and harsh language, which really underscores everything we've been saying. Judge Peter Cahill is a long-time judge in the court. He was appointed by a Republican governor, Tim Pawlenty, but he also was a top advisor to Amy Klobuchar, now the Democratic senator from Minnesota. But when she was the county attorney, Hennepin County attorney, basically, imagine the prosecutor there. So I don't know the judge's political affiliation. He seems to have connections on both sides and runs a very, very professional courtroom. The judge went out of his way to say about Maxine Waters' comments that they were abhorrent and that they showed disrespect for the rule of law, as she has done from the very beginning of her career as a congresswoman way back with the Rodney King case. And he made an extraordinary statement for a trial judge. I mean, I've tried many, many cases in court, and I've observed many cases in court. Rarely have heard a trial judge indicate that there might be reversible error in the case in front of him. He said, I quote, "I'll give you that Congressman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result on this whole trial being overturned."
And now that we have U.S. representatives threatening acts of violence in relation to this specific case, it's mind-boggling to me, Judge.
Well, I'll give you that Congresswoman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned. But what's
That's a rather extraordinary comment. And if I were the defense lawyer here, if there is a guilty verdict of any kind, I might try to convince the judge to set aside the verdict for a new trial. If he's concerned that the case has reversible error, maybe on reflection, he'll be even more concerned about it. But in fact, she has done so much damage with this comment. She's ignited Brooklyn Center and the Twin Cities again. It kind of calmed down. She has basically set a standard for more violence, even worse than has taken place if the verdict is unacceptable. She's surely intimidated a jury. I know the judge maintains the fiction that the jurors aren't listening to the to the television, radio, or listening to the news coverage. It's been my experience as a trial lawyer and prosecutor, whenever I talk to jurors, when they deign to do that. I mean, some do, some don't. Almost universally, I'm told that that's just completely ignored. I remember several jurors telling me, this is the most interesting experience of my life. Of course, I'm going to watch a television coverage. It's just unrealistic to assume that those jurors don't know about Maxine Waters' comments or about the threat that if they reach an unacceptable verdict, they're going to create conflagration in their city and in many other cities throughout America. We'd have to be living in a ivory tower to not realize that that's going on. So this woman has done extraordinary damage, and you don't have to take it from me. You can take it from Judge Peter Cahill, who is looks to me like a Republican or a Democrat, and just as a judge. I didn't agree with every ruling he made in this case. I rarely ever agree with all the rulings a judge makes in any case, mine or someone else's. But I do think the two prosecutors who had the main burden of presenting the case and the defense lawyer acted very professionally. Again, I don't agree with all the decisions they made, but I must say, given a situation where we're watching behavior that is reprehensible in the streets from public officials like Waters, even the mayor and the governor and the other mayors who seem to find it impossible to protect their citizens, to see these four lawyers do their jobs and living up to the high standards of the legal profession, well, that's the one thing that's very encouraging. Whatever the result, I think that all of them, the judge, the two prosecutors, and the defense lawyer, can be very proud of their presentation. And I think it, for most Americans, I think it will allow them to more easily accept this verdict as having been the product of a trial that was conducted with decency and decorum, and that could help. The sad thing is, Democrats will do nothing about this. Now, I don't know if they agree with her, some do, or they're afraid of her, some do. In either case, they make the point I've been making for some time. They're incapable of protecting American cities, including the African Americans that live there, who are the ones that are victimized by and large the most because of their warped ideology. Let's call it that. But Waters, this isn't isolated. Waters has a history that explains just how corrupt the Pelosi Congress is in not only not condemning her, but in ignoring what she does, defending it, and actually making her chairman of one of the most important committees in Congress that regulates Wall Street. This all began, I think it was her first term in Congress, with the Rodney King case. There, whatever the right or wrong of it, this was definitely wrong, and I'm not sure parts of LA have still recovered. There were 6 days of rioting, 63 people murdered, thousands injured, and multi-millions, if not billions of dollars in damage. And parts of LA, as I said, still destroyed and have never come back to this day. Despite all of this, and in the midst of all of this, Congresswoman Maxine Waters began her terrible career by refusing to criticize the rioting, refusing to diffuse the violence, and instead, she incited it even more by agreeing with the anger. She said during a 1992 press conference, if nothing else, Waters is consistent. She's a consistent inciter to violence, harassment, abuse. Here's what she said. There are those people who would like for me to tell people to go inside. to be peaceful, that they have to accept the verdict. Of course, there are people that would tell her that. People who would tell her that are people who respect the rule of law and who deplore violence. There are those people who would like for me to tell the people to go inside, like don't burn down LA or kill 63 people. And accept the verdict. Yeah, that's called the rule of law. This was a close case, the Rodney King case. This is a man who drove 100 miles an hour, 110 miles an hour, a long, long chase. The police either acted properly or overreacted. They were acquitted in one trial. They were convicted later of some of the counts in a federal trial. What should have been taught to the American people by responsible, decent, lawful, law-abiding representatives of the public is to have patience and to respect the system. They got the guilty verdict they wanted in the end. But that wasn't enough. I mean, 63 people had to die, and a whole section of a city had to be destroyed for a generation or two. Maxine Waters agreed with that. What was she doing in Congress? How is she representing the people of the United States in any kind of decent or lawful way? I mean, from the very beginning, Maxine Waters showed herself someone who condoned violence. And given the position she held, condoning violence is helping to create it. And she also showed she had utter contempt for the American rule of law. Some of her other outrageous behavior includes what was an excessively warm friendship with none other than the anti-Semite, hate-inspired, anti-white, anti-American Louis Farrakhan. Just recently, I think it was just recently, some very, very interesting footage has come out of her warmly embracing and being embraced by Louis Farrakhan. Now, you saw that clip that I just showed you, right? Where are the Democrat members of Congress condemning that? This is a man that despises the Jewish people. This is a man that spreads the most vile anti-Semitism I've ever heard in America. This is a man who hates white people. He hates America. He's distorted the Islamic religion to a hate-filled creed. She's hugging him. Not only that, he's made warm, very generous remarks about her. And it was captured, as you saw on camera, and the cowardly Democrats in Congress did nothing to censor her, to stop her, to point out that this shouldn't be done and that their party shouldn't be associated with this kind of hatred. And in so doing for so long, they are associated with it. His hatred of America is at the core of his interpretation of Islam. And their friends, Maxine Waters and Louis Farrakhan. And the cowardly Democrats will do nothing about it. Many of them probably agree with it. Her recent call, just a few years ago, on everyone to abuse and harass members of the Trump administration was outrageous. And it had real consequences. High-level members of the administration were thrown out of restaurants. Their homes were picketed. Their children were threatened. I've been threatened by much worse than Maxine Waters, so it didn't matter to me, but I saw some of the consequences of it from people that would make comments to me, and sometimes I'd inquire and find out where it came from. On several occasions, Maxine Waters was used as a justification for it. A member of Congress telling people to harass and intimidate and abuse government officials because they're members of the other party, or those people who support a different candidate for president or a different party than she did. This is a woman who doesn't respect the rule of law, incites violence, and doesn't understand our democracy at all. In short, this is a bitter, hateful, but apparently a rather stupid woman who's been permitted by the Democratic leadership to rise to the highest ranks in Congress, from which she can inflame racial division so they can continue to be in power. Yes, she should be prosecuted, but the real culprits here are the Democrats in Congress who empower her. And beyond inciting violence, harassment, abuse, and making, at times, totally moronic comments, Waters has done nothing of significance but assemble millions of dollars with her husband in the familiar, Democrat. You come into public office with no money, and then you and your husband end up being millionaires. But we just don't know how that happened. But we do know it happens. And it happened to Maxine, who now is very wealthy. Well, back to Brooklyn Center. Just in case you think Mad Maxine didn't have an effect, within just 2 hours of her incendiary comments, 2 members of the National Guard were shot in Minneapolis, 10 miles away. And the National Guard vehicles were also shot at. Also, the mob in Brooklyn Center, which had remained rather calm that Saturday, all of a sudden, after her remarks got around, they resumed the looting, the assaults, the burnings, and the riots of the previous 6 nights. Maxine came, Maxine incited, and Maxine went back to her luxurious surroundings in the nation's capital, guarded by additional security. I don't have much hope that the Biden administration will do anything about this. As I said, it's a clear violation of the federal code. I'm gonna ask you this because I'm kind of really, really upset about this, because I spent so much of my life in the Justice Department and believing deeply in there's one standard of justice for all. And that was part of the greatness of America. Is there any hope that a Biden Justice Department, with a man in charge who was a federal judge for a long time, is there any chance that she'll be held to account? Is there any chance they'll even investigate it? If there is no chance, then we've lost something very, very precious in America. And that's equal justice under the law. This action of hers requires prosecution, but it certainly requires serious criminal investigation. If that doesn't happen, we've definitely become a one-party criminal justice system on the way to becoming a one-party country. How can we tolerate this? We're letting them take away our country. But notice in all of this incitement, in all of this coverage, in all of this emphasis on race, not a single word is said about the thousands and thousands of blacks who are increasingly being killed in America's urban centers controlled by Democrats. Or the horrific fact that in New York City, there are more black births aborted than black babies born. Yeah, more abortions than births. This is wiping out a generation. Waters, Obama, Catholic Biden, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, George Soros, don't give a damn. those thousands and thousands of black living human beings and black fetuses, embryos, or children mean nothing to them because they can't be exploited. You can't divide over them. You can't divide and try to conquer America and destroy America as we know it. What they're doing is not isolated. This is all part of the hate and reject America movement to socialism. It includes rejecting our history, making it a history of an evil country, a fiction. It means desecrating our flag, dishonoring our national anthem, defaming our founders, even our great emancipator. It means disregarding and trampling on our belief in God and our religions, our traditional families, our freedom of speech, with the great censorship of big tech and big Democrats, our justice system with the double standard, and now our constitutional separation of federal and state government and of our three branches of government. It means destroying our freedom to defend ourselves from a country that's becoming increasingly dangerous. This is too much to deal with right now. I pointed out to let you know that Maxine Waters' violent, abhorrent, and disgraceful conduct is not isolated. It's part of a much larger picture to destroy the America we know, to destroy the rule of law that we honor, to destroy the equal justice under law, and to destroy our form of government and replace it with some form of sick socialism that will allow the Democrat Party to rule us, tell us what to say, how to say it. Otherwise, who knows what will happen to us? And no matter what they do, nothing will happen to them. Well, we're not going to let them get away with it. We're going to call them out at every turn. We're not going to be canceled. I'm not going to be canceled, and you're not going to be canceled. And we're going to prevail because this is America. They don't understand it. They hate it. We love it, and we'll prevail. Thank you, and we'll be back in a few days.